Hi, everyone. Welcome to the PRCA's Leadership Lessons, organized by the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Council. I'm Anushka Matthew, and our goal at the EIAC is to increase and retain the number of women in leadership in the communications and public affairs industry. So it's no secret that women face a lot of barriers to become leaders. And our idea behind creating the leadership lessons was to raise awareness of these barriers. And we really just wanted a platform where people could hear candid personal insights into the journeys taken by women across the industry and really gain some practical advice. So on that note, today we have with us Nicola Ratchford, who is the head of communications and marketing at AIG. So just a sort of small housekeeping point, if you could remain on mute while Nicola and I are having our chat. And then I think around half an hour into our conversation, we'll just hand over to welcome any Q&As. So yeah, great if you could all stay on mute for the first half an hour of the session. Right, Nicola, over to you. Tell us a little bit more about your background, who you are and how you got here.
Thank you, Anushka, and thanks for inviting me on today's session. It's really exciting to join you today, so thank you. So yes, as you say, I'm head of marketing and communications for AIG in the UK. I started my career, I always enjoyed storytelling, even as a child. So that was always my passion. And so it became very obvious to me that I should become a journalist. So actually, I was one of those annoying children that always knew exactly what they wanted to do at school. And that was to become a journalist. I pursued that quite single-mindedly and became a journalist first at Bloomberg. And then I went on to work for a .com back in the days. So I was a journalist for about 6 years. And then I sold my soul. I think that's generally how that works. I moved into PR and communications. I just sort of felt that there might be more to it than what I was getting as a journalist. My sort of inner nosiness compelled me to find out what was going on sort of before when I got the press release. So I moved into communications and I worked for a number of strategic communications consultancies, starting at Finsbury, moving on to a company called Holloway, then on to Stockwell, where Anushka and I worked together. So I spent about 13 years probably doing strategic comms in a consultancy. And then I moved in-house. I got the in-house role and I moved to AIG, which is, for those of you who don't know, is a large global insurance company headquartered in the US. I started out, I've been very fortunate at AIG, and I have progressed quickly in my career. That they're quite good at progressing people. And so I started out doing external communications for EMEA. Then I got all of communications, so not just external. I then became head of communications, so that included internal communications and brand and CSR. And then in 2018, I was also given marketing. So that was a bigger function, in fact, than communications. So we merged the two functions. So so now I look after marketing and communications for AIG in the UK. So that's the sort of whistle-stop career story, but that's not obviously the only story. And so, because we're talking about our whole selves, it's also important to know that I'm also like a real life person. And I'm married, I've got 2 children, I've got 2 dogs, any one of which you may enter the room at any time, or we may hear at some point. And I live in Kent, and so I have I also have another life which continues alongside my working life. So I think we need to embrace all of that when we're talking about ourselves. So that's me, Anushka.
No, absolutely. I think bringing your authentic self to work is something that we explored in one of our first leadership lessons. So I think it's really interesting to see that you've switched your career like quite a few times, as in not just straightforward, but just in terms of the specialisms as well. So what made you decide to switch, from journalism to PR? I know you said it was about selling your soul, but what were sort of factors? And I think this is kind of where we could explore the topic that we really want to focus on, which is our priorities and payoffs,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. When I was very single-minded, as I said, about wanting to be a journalist, and I really only considered that. That's all I thought about. And then I was a journalist, and I thought, right, okay, now I'm a journalist, and now I'm just going to be a journalist, and my career progression will be being a better journalist. And I suppose I realised that's quite there's actually not, that is a very narrow, I mean, of course you can report on other things, you move around different publications, but that's just quite a narrow little ladder. And so I was sort of thinking about, like, where, how do you progress if you're on a very narrow little ladder? And so it was a combination of that, and also a combination of actually getting a bit fidgety and bored. And I was sort of, I was getting the press release, I was writing the press release, and the story was coming out, and I'm like, okay, but what else? Like, isn't there more? Like, what else can I do? Is there not something else that I can do here? And somebody, in fact, it was Laura Gilbert, who we both also have worked with, said, you'd be really good in PR. And that was obviously a terrible insult to any journalist, so it's not the last thing you want to hear. But I thought, well, maybe it'll be interesting, maybe I'll learn something new. But and I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it, because I think it was broader, and I was able to, you're still writing, but you're also advising, and you're strategizing, and you're thinking, and you're sort of pulling in more and more elements of it. So I enjoyed it because it was broader. And I suppose, I mean, it's not a desperately non-linear career path, in that quite a lot of people go from journalism into communications. There may well be some on the call today. It's not hugely unusual, but I think what it showed me, and all the other jumps I've had since, and the progress I've made since, has been about adding extra strands. Because for me, and it is personal, but for me, I just like to sort of expand sideways as well as upwards. I'm always very interested in knowing, like, what else can I do? What else can I learn? How can I use the central skill that I think I have, which is in storytelling, but how can I do that in multiple different ways? Like that, yes, of course, one can write a story. That's one way. But I can now, because I have such a broad remit, I can develop a campaign that uses images, that uses video. I can kind of bring in designers. I can think about brand. I can think about sort of sponsorships or partnerships. I can think about internal communications and external. I've got all of these things that I can play with. So that's, for me, it's about staying interested. So I think that, I think that's, I think it's important to work out what is it that drives you, and then sort of, I'm not going to say plan your career, because that's always really, you're always caught out if you try and plan it in too much of a black and white way. But you kind of progress your career knowing what's true to you, and that's probably, that sort of explains perhaps why I made those jumps and why that's made sense to me.
But also, I guess it's about redefining leadership in a way, isn't it? I think when we were chatting initially, you were saying, being a successful leader doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in the 30 under 30 list, 40 under 40 list, and all these sort of benchmarks of success that are sort of established by the industry, which obviously people, face pressure, and you kind of end up on this path where you're always focused on, let me be like that person. You're comparing yourself incessantly, isn't it? So if you had to sort of go back and sort of think about, how did you go through that process of identifying your priorities? How did they change? At what stage did you force yourself? Maybe I guess one way to look at it was potentially when you became a mom, how did your priorities change? And we know it's not easy to be a working mother, though that shouldn't be the case. So how would you say that's changed things for you?
Yes, that's a lot of questions all in one go. But let me try and sort of filter that. So I think Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to have, as you say, we sort of couched this sort of conversation as about priorities and payoffs. And I think that it's important to note that your priorities will change over time. And so, when I first started out, in my 20s with not a care in the world, all I wanted to do was be a journalist. That's what I did. That was my priority. Then I sort of realized a bit more about myself and thought, actually, I get bored quite easily. So I need to prioritize keeping myself interested in my job. And actually, I am ambitious and I want to progress. So that has to be my priority. But then, different sort of factors come in. And so I suppose if I were giving advice to people, if I'm in any place to give advice, or if I'm, if I can sort of lend my experience, I think first of all, I think of my career not as a ladder, but as a jungle gym, which is to say I like to reach across and go sideways and up. And I would strongly encourage anybody to consider their career in those terms, because ladders are, very narrow. And there's a lot to be gained from a sideways move or a diagonal move eventually. I think those kind of moves can really pay off for all sorts of different reasons. And when I say all sorts of different reasons, that's really the other point, is what does success really mean to you? Because is success like all the way up there at the top of the ladder? Like, is that really what you want? And it might be what you want at some point in your life, but don't be afraid to reassess, because after 3 years, after 5 years, you might think, actually, that's not what I want after all, or I'm okay here, or whatever. So I think that, I think that's really important, is to always reassess, give yourself a break, consider the jungle gym approach as opposed to the ladder approach. And also remember, life is long. We are going to be working until we're 70 at least.
Yes.
So taking a sideways move, taking a career break, doing something completely different, none of these things are ridiculous or impossible anymore. The sort of thing your parents might have gone, oh, what are you doing? But now, what difference does it make? I mean, imagine if you'd have I didn't take a gap year because I was so I must get a job. I can't possibly wait 12 months. Would be such a terrible, disastrous delay, which is ridiculous, of course. I easily, I didn't have enough money to take a gap year, but I just didn't even consider it because I just was in such a rush. I think people are perhaps in less of a rush now because everyone realizes that life is a bit longer, and I think people probably have better perspective than I did back in the 90s. But I think that it's useful to remember that we're all going to be working quite a long time. So taking a bit of a meander in your career is no bad thing at all. And then in terms of priorities and payoffs, which again was sort of something we've been talking about, is I think, and this is sort of cuts to some of the other things that we've been talking about, and what you were talking about before, about in terms of seeing that person at the top of the ladder and thinking, that's where I want to get to. I want to keep climbing, can't stop, can't take a break, got to get to the top of the ladder. And I think, I think it's worth remembering that sort of position right at the top there doesn't come without sacrifice, doesn't come without without priorities, but without prioritizing, and without the payoffs, right? So and again, this is why it's sort of worth reassessing as your life continues. What does success really look like? Do I really want to be have a title with a C in it, or am I okay with something to feel is career success, or could success also be career success plus happy family plus happy life? So there's all sorts of elements I think that is important to bring in that we don't always tend to. And I think even with sessions like this where you sort of take leaders and you want to have inspiring leaders and let's all be like these inspiring leaders, sometimes these inspiring leaders can be intimidating and not inspiring. Because you think, I couldn't, how am I ever going to do that? how do they have time? What do they do? So, and the truth is, probably they don't have time. Probably there's a lot of stuff they're not doing. So, I think it's just important to be a bit more honest about the trade-offs that you might have to make, and what you need to prioritize. So that's. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, I think where it'd be useful to hear more on is what were some of those payoffs? What were the sort of challenges that kind of in your sort of path to leadership so far? How have you faced these challenges, and what were they?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I've had success in my career, and I'm very sort of pleased for that. But I have absolutely sort of made prioritize certain things, and of course as you said, those priorities change. I've got 2 children. I had them, my son's 11, my daughter's 9, and I went part-time when I had children, and at the time I didn't give it lots and lots of thought. I just kind of knew that that's what I should do. And possibly if I'd given it more thought, I might, I don't know whether I would have made that decision again, but at the time that just felt like the right thing to do, and we could just about afford it, and and I was lucky enough to be in a role where my boss said, yes, of course, 3 days a week is fine. So I went to 3 days a week, and I was 3 days a week and then 4 days a week, but probably for about 4 or 5 years, I had that gap. And it's not a gap, it's not a career break, but I think what you have to accept, rightly or wrongly, is that if you take a gap like that, or you just scale back, you lean back slightly, that is probably going to impact the speed of progression that your career is going to make. Probably. Should it? Probably not. Does it? Yes. But and that's just the sort of honesty of it. But I suppose I looked at it and thought, well, so what? And in 5 years' time, I came back full time, and I didn't really miss a beat. And then I carried on, and I'm probably, am I where I would have been if I hadn't have done that? More or less, probably. So it doesn't really matter. So I'd say you need to understand what your priorities are at that time. So at that time, my priorities were keeping my career going, because I was actually very keen not to stop completely. Of course, if you do choose to stop completely, that's fine too. But for me, I decided that wasn't a risk I was willing to take. So that was one priority. But also I wanted to do, baby sensory and all this other stuff that you do with tiny babies, who, by the way, never ever, well, A, they don't remember it, and B, they never thank you for it. So but that's fine. So I did all of the baby sensory and all that sort of stuff 2 days a week, and then worked for the other, and so kept my career just about going. That was right for me, not right for everybody, but that was right for me, and that's I suppose but it's a trade-off. And so you do need to sort of think about what are you prepared to give up? Does that really matter? And only you know the answer to that, which is why there's no point in doom scrolling on LinkedIn and getting depressed because you're not in the under 40, or because you haven't given a TEDx talk yet. And we all do it. My sister-in-law gave a TEDx talk the other day, and I was like half pleased and half why haven't I done a TEDx? I'm such a failure.
Oh, great. Life. Someone in the family to compete against. Yay.
But, but that, this is so unhelpful. So you need to put that to one side. Don't bother measuring yourself against the amazing CEO who somehow has 7 children and, a sort of high-powered career. There's no point. You just have to make the decisions that are right for you. And I was going to talk a little bit, shall I talk a little bit about the sort of data-based approach to prioritization? I don't, just to be super clear, I wish I was organized enough to have any sort of data-based approach. I don't. To be honest, I've done it by sort of gut instinct and accident mostly. But I've got a friend actually who's younger than me, and she's just had her youngest baby, her first baby, and she's very data focused, as is her husband. So they've basically got a sort of whole spreadsheet and timesheet, and they're kind of calculating everything, but they're basically working out, like, what do they spend their time doing? What do they want to spend their time doing? What can they outsource? And then outsourcing those things. And I do think, particularly for working parents, outsourcing is key. And you just need to decide, what are you prepared to outsource? What are you prepared to give up? And that's where the sort of prioritization, I think, really kind of comes in.
And I think that's also one of the ways in which, because it's automatically it falls on the woman, right? That you have the baby, then it's always the woman who has to give up the career, who has to, take a step back, etc. And I suppose having that, data-based approach potentially helps you do it together more, and there's sort of equitable sharing of however you decide to take a step back, I suppose. That's another way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. I absolutely think it does. And yeah, that's what this my friends have been doing. They're both they're sort of very much co-parenting, and they know what each of their strengths are. They know what each of them bring. So, and then it's like, well, what, and what doesn't fall in those areas gets outsourced. So that's, so I do think this is kind of what I was talking about in terms of, like, climbing a ladder or progressing in your career, does involve, the trade-offs, right? The payoffs. So you got to kind of decide, what are you gonna not do in order to, focus on your career. If your career is a priority, if you want to progress, how can you make that happen? I don't know if you can hear in the background, but my cleaner is here right now. So that's like a perfect example. I don't like cleaning. I never have, even before I even owned a house, I didn't like cleaning. So I decided it was worth the sort of 4 hours I would have to spend on a Saturday cleaning is worth the money that I spend on a cleaner. Like, that is a perfect sort of outsourcing agreement, because it's something I don't want to do and something I'm prepared to pay someone else to do. That is, so I've outsourced that. And I think once you have kids, there's more outsourcing required. And so you just need to get comfortable with that. And some of those things you want to carry on doing, and some of them you don't, but you need to work out what's important to you.
And I think you had an excellent example of the school run as well, isn't it? Like, can you potentially, do you want to talk a little bit more about that one? Because I thought that was a brilliant example.
I very rarely do the school run. I very rarely do it because I have a nanny. So I'm in a very fortunate position that I have a nanny. To be honest, I would not be able to have progressed as I have in my career if I didn't have full-time childcare. It's just not, I just don't think it would be possible. There's no, because, we all know what communications is like. It's sort of last minute. You've got to suddenly jump on the phone. I work for a US company. It's sometimes into the evenings. It's not reliable hours necessarily. So I'm fortunate enough for it to make economic sense for me to have a nanny, which essentially means I'm outsourcing quite a lot of the parenting that I would otherwise be doing. So you've just got to decide, like, which bits are you okay with outsourcing. And it is nice to pick the kids up after school sometimes, but equally, I'm actually quite happy to outsource certain bits. So I'm happy to outsource that. I do the mornings, actually, so I don't outsource the mornings. Happy to outsource washing all their clothes and pairing their socks. I don't do that. But I always make a cake. Why? I don't know. For birthdays, I have this sort of, we can go into therapy about this if you like, but I have this kind of compulsion that I need to make a cake. Except that I don't for my daughter anymore, because she gets very cross because she only wants cakes from shops, and she gets cross with me if I make her a homemade cake. But my son will still, they're humouring me. It's because it's for me. I am making the cake for myself. not really for my children. So, but that's a priority. So for me, like I feel I'm a proper mother because I've made a sort of very amateur looking cake. So I don't outsource that, but the other things I'm perfectly prepared to outsource. And as we were talking about this, and so I'd say, and so sometimes my children call me Sarah because that's the name of my nanny, and they just, presume they're with Sarah sometimes when they're with me, and that's okay. Like, I'm all right with that. Yeah. But for some people, that might be awful. That might be the worst thing ever. So you just got to know where your boundaries are, what's going to push your button, but then accept that that's that's the choice you're making.
Yeah. I think that's really key, isn't it? Acceptance. I think that's really good advice, actually. So that you're not constantly in a battle with yourself, basically.
Yeah, there's no point, and guilt has no value whatsoever. So there's no point in feeling guilty, and there's no point really in feeling envious. As I said, that's sort of everybody else's Instagram moments where they're, picking up the kids, but also doing a conference call and this is all lies. So nobody.
It's all lies.
Nobody does it all brilliantly. So just accept, just decide, what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and then just get comfortable with it.
Yeah. And then moving on, I think you said that your manager, when you decided to go part-time, was really supportive of that. What do you think workplaces and people already in leadership positions can do to support, and make the workplace more equitable when there are big life changes like becoming a mother, for example?
Yeah, so many things. I think it's a lot better now than it was. For sure. And to be honest, like even in the 90s, I was still just sort of delighted to have a job. Like you're having given birth. Even though that's ridiculous. I was just grateful to be allowed to come to work. Whereas I think now, I think shared parental leave is extremely important, like getting dads involved right from the outset, rather than just like, you can have 2 weeks and that's it. But if they can share the leave equally, that instantly implies, an equality of parenting, which is really, really important. I think that's super important. I think ensuring that people have cover when they're off as well, because if if you have an employee who gives birth and disappears and it makes life harder for everybody else, then, are you incentivized to hire women of a certain age? No, you're not. Right. So, that's a really tricky bit. So absolutely providing maternity cover. Well, I've put my thumb up again, haven't I?
Yeah, I know you've been.
Oh, it's fine.
It's okay. You can like your own points. That's totally allowed.
Stop moving your hands. So I think that's really important. But also, I think there's a lot more being done around flexible working now as well. And I think that's important. That is obviously very important. And I do think the pandemic, for all its sort of woes, means now it's just a lot easier. It's a lot easier to just make that quick switch as well. I'm thinking about today. As I told you before, my son is poorly today. So he's in there lying down sick. And so, as it happens, I wasn't planning on going into the office today anyway. But if I had, pre-pandemic, that would have been a disaster, because I'm like, oh God, I can't go in, or I'd have to wait. My nanny doesn't come till a bit later, so I'd have to could I have called her in earlier, or what would I do? And I couldn't have got my train straight away, and I would have been late. Whereas now it's so much easier just to sort of instantly switch your day. All of the meetings are sort of half on Zoom or Teams or whatever anyway, so it's a lot easier to make that sort of quick switch and not really miss a beat work wise, while still looking after your poorly boy. So yeah, I think that's, I do think there are a lot of switches I do think a lot of things have improved already, but yeah, I think we still need to work on, I think, shared parental leave, and just sort of treating parents as parents rather than mums and dads, because the emphasis is, as you say, often much more on the mum.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually. I think we're kind of halfway into our conversation, so perhaps we can just round off and I think there's one question I still want to ask, which is, did you kind of have, I mean, how important do you think mentorship or is in your career, and how did you experience mentorship? Did you find that useful? Have you heard of others who are mentors? Anything on that at all?
Yeah, no, that's really, thank you. Yeah, no, I've had a lot of, well, I've had mentors and I've had people who've inspired me, and I've worked, and I've been lucky enough to work with lots of senior women who, have been very inspirational and juggled careers and kids, and you think, well, if they can do it, then probably I can do it. Like I say, with that sort of proviso that it's, it's quite, you shouldn't really look at those on the pedestal too much, because sometimes that's unachievable. Although actually, I won't name names. It was a very senior lady who I have worked with who was C-suite for sure, and I met, it's funny because she's on this sort of pedestal of sort of awesome achievement, and we just sort of said hello, how are you, got chatting, she said, and I mentioned that I had kids, and so she instantly was like, how old are you, what's your routine in the morning? The first thing she wanted to know was like, what time do you wake up, how do you get them dressed, what childcare do you have, how's you, and I said, oh well, I do this, and I've got this, and I drop them there, and I do that. She's like, right, okay. She's like, well, I do that, and then she just walked me through her routine as well. She's like, I've got a housekeeper that comes at 6, the school bus comes at 7:32, so,
yeah.
But that is what that made me realize, as much as her career was totally unattainable for me, but every working mother is obsessed with the morning timetable. It just, I thought, oh yes, there's some shared commonalities here. We're all just like, what time do you wake up? What time do you get the kids up? Where's the uniform? Like, how do you get them? How do you get everyone out the house?
Quite military precision.
Absolutely military. Everyone is the same. So that was quite interesting. But I've had some mentors in my career, most of whom have been men, actually, which I think is actually really important as well, to have someone in your corner who can just sort of, and often it'll take a man to go, like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you be worried about that? Like, of course you can do it. So sometimes they see things in a different way, which is really useful. And AIG have been very fortunate. AIG are very good at promoting women into leadership positions, and they have a program which they call the Women's Executive Leadership Initiative, which is a mouthful, so we call it WELI for short, WELI. And I was lucky enough to be on WELI a few years ago, and we got flown to New York. There was sort of 30 women basically get put in this sort of year-long program where we had we got mentors, we got sponsors, which is sort of one step up from a mentor. So that's somebody in the business who's actually really lobbying on your behalf rather than just listening and advising. They're really kind of proactively supporting you. And we also had coaches, and I would say coaching is fantastic if you're ever fortunate enough to be in a position to have it through work, or if you can afford it. It's so useful to have someone, because that's where they really advise you. They can really see through all the day-to-day kerfuffle and the panic and the angst, and help you work out what your priorities really are. Like, is this what you really want? Like, how are you going to get there? Like, what is it that's in your path? What's really blocking you? And they can really sort of help you with that. So I've been fortunate enough to benefit from many of those things, and they've all been really, really helpful.
Okay, then I think that's fantastic, Nicola, to hear, and there's so much to learn from you, especially in terms of, I think my key learnings were that you have to identify your priorities at every stage in your life, and they're not fixed, they're going to change all the time, so you have to evaluate what they are. I think that's really key, because again, as you said, it's not about a thin ladder that you have to climb, it's about the jungle gym that you have to swing on, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm opening it up to the group. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Nicola? Oh, I think there's a raised hand from David.
Hi, Nicola. I'm David. I'm sort of a colleague of Anushka's on the council. The WELI initiative sounds really, really interesting. I'm kind of starting to hear a few of these things across the industry that I work in, and then just more generally, I think people seem to be becoming aware that just talking about genuinely being equitable and diverse and inclusive isn't enough. There actually needs to be sort of positive championing. And I just wanted to know how that actually got set up at AIG, and how the company actually got around to acknowledging the problem and then setting the program up and running it.
Yeah, it's been running for a number of years now. Thank you for that question. It might almost be 10 years old now, actually. So they've been running it for quite a while, and it's sort of evolved. At the moment it's still virtual because of the travel situation that we've been in over the last couple of years. But they've still been running it sort of every year. And I think they identified, as many companies have done, that it's the pipeline. That you've got to keep filling the pipeline full of women to kind of get them into these leadership positions. And they took a decision to really put their money where their mouth is. So it's a big investment. As I said, they take about 30 or so women, and they certainly, when I did it, I was fortunate enough to travel. So most of them are in North America, but scattered across North America, and probably a good 10 or so from outside. So we all got put up in New York, and we had extensive coaching and training, and it was it's very, and then once you're on it, it's a network, so we all help each other out, right? So and when you're on it, it's a good excuse to go and talk to anyone, because it's so well known within AIG. If you call someone and say, hey, I'm on the Welly program, I'd love to have 30 minutes, everyone says yes. So it's very effective, and it got set up, as I said, I think they identified the need, and they decided they really were going to drive it. But it's not, these things aren't cheap, and you've got to invest in them. Of course, some of them, when you invest in, they become so well trained they leave. So that's always your risk, right? But I think overall they find they do. I know I've spoken to HR because actually I've had a few people who've come to me and said, how have they done that? How can we replicate it in our own company? And I have had a chat with HR about how they do it. And I don't know exactly how, but they track it, they measure it, they sort of monitor where people's careers go afterwards. So they know that they're getting a return on the investment. It's definitely worth it for them. So it's a very good program, but I would encourage, companies to do that. You do need to be quite proactive, I think.
I would another follow up on that, if that's all right. Running it for 10 years, I think, is probably longer than most other companies have been running something like that. And there's kind of a viewpoint that I've heard that stuff needs to keep on going until things have changed enough that you essentially don't need that program anymore.
Yeah. I think
has it got to that point, or do you think there's still a long way to go?
I think we'll know when we've succeeded, when there are just lots of mediocre women in leadership positions. That's success, isn't it? I think that's when we know that we'll have reached true success. So no. I mean, it's a perpetual struggle. I think struggle maybe is not quite the right word, but it's definitely not done. That's for sure. It's not done until it's 50-50. And it's not 50-50, so it's not done. And a lot of people ask, I wasn't sure if you were going to ask, do they have one for men? And the answer is yes, they do. But they have one it's actually only in North America, and they have it for men who are, of colour or of some sort of, disadvantaged potential group. So they do have it also for men, and it's also very, very successful. I've met some of the men on it who have done really well as a result. So it is quite a good program.
Thanks, Nicola. Any questions from anyone else?
Ooh. Hi there. This is Sankalpa, if I may. Just to start off by just saying thanks, Nicola, for sharing your experiences with us today. It's been really insightful. When you talked earlier about working part-time, I think you indicated how it could slow progression. I was just wondering if you could perhaps elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, and I might be being a bit, maybe it didn't, maybe I'm being unfair. It's hard to know, isn't it? It's hard to know whether or not, would I be somewhere else if I hadn't have done that? And I don't think it's always the case. I think there are some companies that are extremely progressive and would not bat an eyelid and would continue to sort of move people up career paths. I think that probably happens in big companies more than small companies. And I think, to be honest, so here's the problem. Sheryl Sandberg wrote her book too late. That's really who we need to blame here, because she wrote that book about leaning in, and I think I was just coming to the end of my sort of part-timeness, and I was like, if I'd have read this 5 years ago, I'm about to raise my hand, stop it. If I'd have done that, if I read this 5 years ago, then I might have approached this all slightly differently. But I think I consciously leant back. So if it did impact my career a little bit and slow me down, it was, I can't say it's because I was working for a terrible company who weren't nice. I think I was happy to just not really sort of push myself into any sort of career progressing situations because I had other priorities, and I was willing to do that. Yeah, so I was willing to do that, and that was the choice I made, and I'm okay with it. And actually, in the long run, I don't think it's particularly slowed me down. Particularly, as I said, because we're all going to be working till we're 70, so it doesn't really matter. but yeah, so I do think, I don't think I went backwards. I just think I trod water for a bit, but happily and willingly.
Thanks for sharing that. That's that all. I think it makes sense where, you've talked so much about choices and priorities, and that's what it really comes down to, which is very much the essence of this discussion. So yeah, thanks. That's really helpful.
That's okay. Yeah, I think it's just about sort of owning it a little bit. Like I'm not cross with anyone or anything. I had children, and I wanted to do baby sensory, because who doesn't? Actually, no one does. It's awful.
Yeah, I think anyone else with any other questions? If not, I think we might just wrap it up. I had just one final question, which is just a very kind of me question, because I love to read, as you know, Nicola. This is one of the things we bonded over at Stockwell. Any kind of books that you would recommend that really, it's not just the Sheryl Sandberg book, but things that you genuinely found useful. But even TED Talks, or I know whoever influences who you follow, something practical that people can kind of latch onto.
Yeah, absolutely. No time to read nowadays, initiatives. If I can't get in a 30-minute podcast, I'm not interested. No, there are a few books. And I never used to like reading these sort of business books. I thought they were really boring.
I would be caught dead in the self-help section.
I know, right? But actually, I've found a few that I do quite like. And actually, I read, this is a real classic, the seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which is it's old. And I thought it was going to be one of those boring workbooks that was going to be about, what habit, have a good to-do list, and I don't know, where it die. I don't know what it was going to say. It was nothing like that. It actually kind of was quite transformative, and it is all about like priorities. What do you stand for? What's at your core? What's your life message? It was really quite interesting. I would thoroughly recommend it. It's just as much about your personal life as it is about your working life. It's all about prioritization and being values. Very, very much so. And I tell you what's really useful, and this is, I do every day, I keep this, it's the separation of what's urgent and what's important, because they are two different things. And there are lots of things that are urgent but not actually important. And so sometimes those urgent things, it's urgent, important, or outsource. So again, it's just like, what do I really need to do today versus what is everybody else putting on my to-do list today? And here's the way he approaches his day and his life. I do it now. I've got like this big my to-do list is based on the way he does his to-do lists, which is not a list of urgent priorities. So I thoroughly recommend that book. I do think that's great. And the other one we discussed this, it's not really a workbook at all. It's actually more of like a couples therapy book. but it's called Couples That Work. And I think if you're in a relationship and you both work, it's a really useful book about just how to manage that. Because and also what it's really good at is that it will change. So, you know, I met my husband when we were in our early 20s, and we were both, you know, super ambitious and going in different directions. But, you know, of course, you know, then you hit 30 and, you know, that's different again. And then we're 35 and it's different again. And then we have kids, and then now the kids are older. And so, like, how you approach your dual careers is really, really, you know, if you are in a relationship, it's absolutely essential. So one of Sheryl Sandberg's biggest pieces of advice was marry well. Yeah, and so managing how you're both approaching your careers is absolutely vital. And so just understanding, you know, is one person's career taking precedent over the other?
We may have lost Nicola. Right, I think yeah, I think we have lost Nicola because her screen is frozen. But I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who's joined. I hope you found that a really useful session. And as part of the EIAC, we'll definitely be putting up the sort of key takeaways from our session, so you can follow that as well.